Okay, alright, okay. Alright, okay. Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and I will be talking to you about the books I read in July. We have read quite a few graphic novels so far this summer, but I have read even more. Can you believe it? It looks like I read around 6 books, 11 audiobooks, 15 manga, and 15 graphic novels. I'd say that's pretty good. I kind of want to go over the manga first. This month I read Beastars volumes 1 through 6. And I know what you're thinking, Danny, isn't that like manga for furries? Maybe? I don't know. I like it, so leave me alone. Beastars is about basically anthropomorphic animals that all go to school together. The main conflict is one of the students gets eaten. There's like a romance involved. The main character is this wolf. That's all I'm gonna go into right now, but it has a lot of like interesting subplots and I think the art is really creative and unique. I gave pretty much all the books 4 stars except the first one, which I gave 5 stars. The first book just really was well done and I loved the introduction of everything. The pacing was like perfect. So yeah. I also read My Hero Academia volumes 2 through 5. I read the first one last month. It's been interesting reading the manga since I've watched a lot of the anime. The anime follows the manga surprisingly well. They don't really leave a whole lot out in the show. I rated the second book 5 stars because there was so much action going on. I can't remember exactly the timeline, but I believe it's during one of the tests. All I remember is that there was a lot of action going on and I got through it super fast because I was really intrigued and they were introducing new characters. Volume 3 I gave 4 stars and then volumes 4 and 5 I gave 3 stars just because I really don't like the tournament arc. I just think it's overdone. I think volume 5 was the last one in the tournament arc. Once I get my hands on volume 6, we'll see where it goes. Next, I read Hunter x Hunter volumes 1 and 2. I think I watched a couple episodes of the anime back in the day, but I never really watched all of them. So it's been really interesting to read the manga. The manga is pretty good, and I am hoping to continue reading the other novels. They're kind of hard for me to get a hold of at the library that I use. For volumes 1 and 2, I rated them both 4 out of 5 stars. I'm hoping to read more of them once I can get my hands on them. Next, I read Blood on the Tracks volume 1. The people who do Blood on the Tracks, their art style is so interesting. It's really unique. You don't see that art style in many manga books, at least that I have read. The pacing's a little weird. It's not very wordy. It's more artsy. But the first novel is pretty interesting. It has some weird vibes to it. I thought that it would be more of like a horror, which I guess it kind of is, but it's not really that scary, at least in the first book. Maybe it gets scarier in the second, and I am looking forward to reading more. Next, I read Comey Can't Communicate, volume 1. I've been seeing this series advertised a lot. I just saw that it was available at my library, so I borrowed it. I'm definitely not the demographic. It's definitely more towards younger people, like at least high school age. The whole premise is that this girl like can't talk, but she's hot, so she like gets away with it, but she's trying to learn how to talk, and the protagonist in the story is like trying to teach her and like make friends and stuff. I don't know, I just don't like the way Comey's portrayed. Oh, if you're attractive enough then you don't need to talk, or oh, it's so cute that she can't talk. Like, I don't know, it seems a little patronizing and it's just not for me, so I am not gonna read any more of that. I rated Comey Can't Communicate 2 stars. I didn't like it. All the characters were kind of annoying, actually, now that I think about it. Except Comey, because she literally can't talk. Like, how can you be annoying if you can't talk? I need to stop while I'm ahead. On a brighter note, I read Spy Family Volume 1. Everybody's obsessed with this anime. I haven't watched the anime at all, but I wanted to kind of see what the hype was about. It was really cute. All the characters are really, really interesting. Like, I can't wait to get to know them more. So I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm looking forward to seeing all the misadventures that the characters get into. There's a lot of action in it that I appreciate, and it's just a fun romp. I really like it. On to the graphic novels. I read Sweet Tooth Volumes 1 through 3. There is a Netflix show based on these books. I haven't watched it. Maybe I will watch the Netflix series and get back to you guys. But I saw the novels available at my library and I'm like, I want to check this out. You're just following this boy that was raised in a cabin, and all the people he meets once he finally ventures out of the park that he's lived in his whole life. There's like this plague where everyone was getting sick, and in that same year, every child born was born like half animal people. But the way the art is, it's not like in an attractive way or like a furry way. It's very dystopian. Like, so many people have died from the plague that the world is almost like The Walking Dead, kind of, minus the zombies, but you know, people are just terrible overall. The first two I rated 4 out of 5 stars, and the third one I rated 5 stars because it got real dark. It got real scary and interesting, and there was a bunch of action going on, and I was like, what is happening? I'm hoping that the next books are just getting better and better. Root for me on that one. Next up, I read Rick and Morty Volumes 11 and 12. As you all know, I am a fan of Rick and Morty. The Rick and Morty novels that I read last month weren't that good. I think I rated even some of them 3 out of 5 stars, which is not something I like to do. 11 and 12, they were definitely on the upswing. I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. Just, you know, normal Rick and Morty hijinks, except there was less repetition of, you know, it just being a continuation of something that happened in one of the episodes of the show. Like, who cares? But yeah, I don't know if they're coming out with a 13th volume. I know that they're doing a Rick and Morty Presents Volume 4 coming out soon. More Rick and Mortys over here. So then next I read Rick and Morty Ever After, which was like a fantasy version of Rick and Morty. Like, I don't know. I can't really remember, but I remember liking it a lot. I don't know what it is about Rick and Morty and them like teleporting into different fantasy worlds. I just really liked it. 4 out of 5 stars. It'd be nice if they did more things like that. Fantasy-based science fiction. I don't know. I'm a sucker for that stuff. I also read Rick and Morty Pocket Like You Stole It. This was a book kind of centered around Pokemon culture and Tamagotchi culture and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of stupid. Like, the concept was good, the execution was poor. It was kind of gross, but not in like a funny way. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't read it again. My last Rick and Morty that I read was Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons 2, Painscape. I really liked the first Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm kind of sad that I didn't really like it. It basically was like a virus had taken over them to where like everybody was obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons in the world, and there was this whole like subplot about like one of Rick's characters like coming to life and this virus coming into the world. I don't know, but it was kind of convoluted, and I appreciate the creativity, but I just didn't like it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. A lot of doo-doo Rick and Mortys. Maybe they'll come out with another one that I consider a 5-star, maybe they won't. But so far, only Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons, the first one, is the only 5-star for me. I read The Swamp Thing by Brian K. Vaughan, volumes 1 and 2. I really liked the original Swamp Thing comics, so the fact that Brian K. Vaughan did his own like continuation was really neat. It basically is the daughter of Swamp Thing and like what happens with her life. It was really interesting following her and seeing like what would happen, because the whole point of her creation was that she was like half human, half swamp thing. Basically they wanted there to be some sort of harmony between the two, and she was trying to figure out whether humans needed to be exterminated so that the plants can survive on the planet, or if she was going to side with the humans and let them continue destroying the environment. It was really interesting following her travels to where she was in different situations and talking to different people and coming to a conclusion about what she should do. I really recommend these books. It doesn't really have good ratings, but it is what it is. They can't all be winners, but it's a winner in my heart. Aww. I gave them both 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. Next, I read Black Science Volume 1, How to Fall Forever. Black Science is a graphic novel series. I believe it was done by Rememder. It's about this group of like scientists that create really unethical technology where they can kind of jump from world to world with the intention of finding the future of medical technology. It does not go well, as you would assume, jumping to alien planets and stealing their technology. I really like the concept. It's very dark, there's a lot of death, very science fiction. I hope to read more of them. I rated Black Science Volume 1 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to read the next one, but we will see. I'm glad I did read it. Oh, another one by Rememder. I read Venom by Rememder. It's supposed to be the completed collection, but it said it's volume 1. Regardless, I grew up to be like a huge Spider-Man fan. I loved the Spider-Man movies. I would read the comics when I could get a hold of them. I saw this Venom comic at the library and I'm like, hell yeah, I'll check that out. It's Flash Thompson as Venom instead of Eddie Brock, but it's supposed to take place after Eddie Brock is no longer Venom. Flash is fresh out of the military, you know, he had to have his legs amputated, so the military has him using this Venom suit to do government stuff. I don't know. You can't really control the Venom symbiote, so a lot of things happen. You get a lot of character development for Flash, which I enjoyed. So if there are more of the volumes that come out, I will read them, because the ending was kind of grim. I'm like, dang, that was not satisfying at all. The last fourth of the book, though, was basically like if Deadpool had the Venom symbiote, and it didn't really work for me. I like Deadpool, but I think he should stay away from Venom. I don't like them together. It doesn't mesh well. Just my opinion. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I would probably read it again, with the exception of the Deadpool portion, and I hope to read more Spider-Man and Venom graphic novels. I read The Walking Dead Book 2. It was fantastic. It was dark. It was gritty. It made me feel icky. It made me feel gross to be a human. As someone who watched the show, we all know that the whole point of it is, you know, who are the real monsters, the zombies or the people? And that is really emphasized in book 2. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out, because in book 2, like almost the whole book takes place in the prison. 5 out of 5 stars, get it. Next, I read 7 to Eternity Volume 2, Ballad of Betrayal. In the previous month, I read the first volume. The world building was a little hard to grasp in the first novel, but by the second novel, I really was getting to know the characters and figuring out their motivations and all the way that the world works. The second volume was definitely a 5-star read for me. You find out more about the villain, you find out more about the protagonist's family, and the ending was not what I expected. I highly recommend reading this series. The art, amazing. Chef's kiss. Perfect. Sci-fi, fantasy. It's not sci-fi, it's fantasy. We had this discussion before. The last graphic novel I read in July was Paper Girls Volume 6. I just found out that they're making a show of Paper Girls, which I'm like, That'll be interesting, especially since I was just saying how it has Stranger Things vibes. I'm really excited to see what they do with it. I wanted to finish the books, and the 6th one is the last one in the series. I was a little skeptical because I don't really like time travel as a trope. I was feeling like it was really convoluted in a lot of the books, but reading the 6th book explained a little more, and they wrapped it up very nicely. The ending was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was very satisfying for it to end in that way. I highly recommend reading the entire series. Don't get discouraged and stop at like 4 or 5 novels, because the 6th one is really good. I don't know how they're gonna do a whole show for a 6-book series of graphic novels, but I guess we'll find out. Now, on to the audiobooks that I read this month. I had a couple days in July where I still had my Audible subscription. I listened to 2 short story type audiobooks. The first one was The Black Pages, Black Stars Volume 2 by Nnedi Okorafor. She is a really prestigious? I know she's really known for her sci-fi, and I actually have, I think, one of her novels, Binti. The Black Pages, I didn't really like too much. It was a short story, and there was a lot of information, and it was kind of hard to keep up. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars just because I felt like there was a lot of missing information, and reading the other reviews that I saw, I wasn't the only one who thought that. I don't think I'd recommend it. It was mystical. It wasn't really sci-fi. It was more fantasy, I think. Next book I listened to was The Egg and Other Stories by Weir. I liked it. It was pretty good, especially the egg itself. That was the one story that I was like, what? You're blowing my mind, Andy, come on! I think that was kind of a precursor to me deciding I really need to read more Weir. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I listened to The Standin by Lily Chu. This is a very modern romance. It's basically about this girl who lives in Toronto. She gets like recognized on the street as the celebrity that she looks like. The celebrity ends up like hiring her to be her stand-in and like go to her appearances because she's like an actress. And basically it's kind of like the struggles of like working with her like partner, or the actress's partner. They have like a thing, they have chemistry, I don't know. As I mentioned, it's very modern. There's a lot of modern lingo. It's a nice feel-good romp, and I can always appreciate that, especially in an audiobook. I like an audiobook where I can just, you know, listen and not really think too hard about them. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I would definitely listen to it again on audiobook. The Audible audiobook is really good. That's how I feel. Another Audible original that I listened to was Ender's Game Alive, the full cast Audioplay by Orson Scott Card. So this is like Ender's Game, but read by like people that were in the movie. It wasn't good. It wasn't very good. The acting was kind of weird. Maybe I just wasn't the demographic, because I know it's like a YA novel. I think I'm gonna stick with audiobooks instead of people pretending they are the character. I usually like those, because the whole reason I got into audiobooks was because I loved narrative podcasts. Maybe this one just wasn't for me. I gave it 3 stars. 3 out of 5 stars. It is what it is. Next, I listened to another romance novel called Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This was one of the Book of the Month books when I first started getting Book of the Month, and I didn't pick it, but I was interested in, you know, reading it because a lot of people left it good reviews. It's basically about this girl who's like very well off because of her being a doctor, and she meets this like country boy. I bet this trope has a name, but I haven't read it before. I really like that it was kind of like reversed, where the woman was like really successful and the man was less successful. They had this like reoccurring thing about where if you see a dragonfly, then change is about to happen, and I really liked the way they did that in the story. I thought it was really memorable and cute. I rated this book 5 stars because I can't think of anything wrong with it. It was just a really good romance novel. It was closed door, so there wasn't like anything sexual. It just made me happy. I also listened to Drop Dead Gorgeous by Rachel Gibson. This book, it weirded me out a little bit because I'm like, isn't this the premise of Drop Dead Diva, which was like a show about a girl who like died and switched bodies with like another girl. One girl was skinny and one girl was overweight basically, but that's not really what Drop Dead Gorgeous was about. It was more like the protagonist dies and then like the other girl, while they're in limbo, tries to steal her spot into heaven. So because this lady tries to steal her spot in heaven, she gets to take her body and go back to Earth. It was advertised as a romance, but it's definitely not a romance. There's like no romance in it. It's more of just kind of like the culture shock, going from kind of being like a hick in Texas to being like a well-off person. It was more comedic than anything. It was very funny. I really liked the banter in it because otherwise I probably wouldn't have liked it. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, despite the premise being eerily similar to Drop Dead Diva, I still enjoyed it. Looks like I listened to a lot of romance audiobooks this month and I didn't even realize it. I listened to The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. The Kiss Quotient is a relatively successful, I believe it's a trilogy. I don't know if there's more of them coming out. I know there's 3 out right now. The Kiss Quotient is about this autistic woman who's relatively successful and she hires a sex worker to basically teach her how to do it. They couldn't really teach anything in their one session, so he agrees to like start having her be his like pretend girlfriend so she can be in social situations with like a pretend boyfriend and learn how to be a good girlfriend. I don't know if the premise is necessarily politically correct. I do like there being some representation for autistic women. I don't think it was offensive. It was just a really unique premise. The end was very feel good. Everything wrapped up so perfectly, as a lot of romance novels do, like almost unrealistically, but not so much that it wasn't believable. Well, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I have a second book for some reason. I think I got it at the thrift store, so I'm definitely gonna read the second one and I'll let you know how it is. The next book I listened to was I Kissed Cheryl Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. This is a young adult queer novel. There's a lot of modern slang in it that I kind of appreciated. The banter was really cute. There's a lot of queer characters. There was like non-binary representation. It had a really good premise. I just was not the demographic. I feel like that's like my tagline for this channel is, I was not the demographic for this book. I did enjoy it regardless. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't necessarily read it again, but I enjoyed it and I would recommend it to people who are teenagers. I listened to Mass Effect Andromeda Initiation by N.K. Jemisin. We discussed the last Mass Effect book that I read and it was not that good and I was very disappointed. This book is by a different author, which is N.K. Jemisin, who is notorious for writing like fantastic science fiction. However, this is the first book I've read by her and I was really happy with it. It wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but I feel like N.K. Jemisin did really good with what was there. The book kind of followed one of the NPCs that is on your team in the Mass Effect Andromeda game named Cora Harper. It's basically about Cora being, you know, testing out the predecessor to Sam, which is the name of the AI in Mass Effect Andromeda. It was a nice little adventure prequel to Mass Effect Andromeda. It was much more entertaining than the previous book I read in this series, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Wasn't my favorite, but it was way better than the last one that I read. I think I might as well just read the next one in the Andromeda series. I'll keep you updated. Let's talk about my favorite audiobook of this month. Yay! My favorite audiobook that I listened to was Project Hail Mary by Nnedi, Weir. This book was phenomenal. I was really excited. I bought it on Audible. This guy, the protagonist, is going into space to basically figure out why the sun is not emitting as many rays as it should, basically. I don't want to give too much away, but you do like meet an alien, and like the relationship between like him and the alien is just so interesting. I laughed, I cried, I was scared. This book was so good. I highly recommend it. 5 out of 5 stars. If you like science fiction, I've even heard people that don't like science fiction love this book. This is gonna be one of my favorites of the year, I guarantee it. The last audiobook that I finished this month, and I say finished because I started this audiobook in April. The audiobook that I finished was It by Stephen King. This was the first ever Audible book that I got with my free trial like years ago, but I never actually started it. Let me tell you the reason why. It's 46 hours long. It's like a 1,000-page book. It's huge. And the print's real tiny, at least in the copy that I have. It's so long. Like, it has so much unnecessary detail that like is pointless. I mean, you do like find out a lot about the characters, but to a point where I'm like, why does this matter? Can we please move it along? Maybe it's just because this is like one of the first Stephen King books that I've read. I definitely am not going to be listening to any more Stephen King books on audiobook. I thought that it would be better if I did that, and I'd be less likely to like, you know, not finish it if I listened to it on audiobook, but I ended up like stop listening to it for like a month at a time and coming back to it multiple times because I just couldn't deal with it. Something about the part where the narrator is like narrating one of the kids who's like super racist and just like screaming the N-word over and over again. I was listening to this while I was at work working on my spreadsheets, and I'm like, I just feel gross listening to this right now. And I know Stephen King was just trying to portray how shitty that kid was, but I just did not get a good feeling. I guess that is the point of horror books, is to feel icky. I just don't like that kind of icky, I guess. Let alone the scene that everyone talks about, you know, where children are doing things. I understand why it happened, because you know, in order to escape it, when they're kids, they have to show the ultimate form of love. I don't want to talk about it. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. I'm glad that I got through it because it was quite an undertaking, and now I can say that I read it, I guess. I do like the idea that it isn't actually a clown, it's something else. I don't know if that's a spoiler. 3 stars, probably won't read it again. LDR, too long didn't read. I listened to it. Well, I actually didn't read many actual books this month. I read 6. The first one that I finished was Ordinary Strength. We Already Have What It Takes by Sean Patrick. This is an arc that I won through a Goodreads giveaway. It's a memoir about Sean, who grew up to be like a police officer, and it kind of details a lot of things that really happened and shaped his character throughout his life into his adulthood, where he finds out he has like polycystic kidney disease. It goes over like the different things that happened in his life that made him the way he is, and like what motivates him and keeps him going. It was pretty much like a self-help book. I've never highlighted so many passages in my Kindle before. Like, that was the first. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think this was a significant read. It's not something I would have organically picked up, but I am very grateful that I read it. The next book that I read was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is a historical fantasy. It takes place in like, I don't think it's like medieval Russia. It's about this family that lives out in like a little village. One of the daughters is in tune with nature and very witchy. I don't know a lot about Russian folklore, so it was really interesting to get a take on that. There are a lot of like nicknames in Russian that I didn't really understand. Maybe it's because I read it on Kindle. I didn't understand a lot of it. I wish I would have known there was a glossary in the back, but I just raw dogged it, you know? I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I believe this is a trilogy. I'm probably gonna read the other books soon, maybe? The next book I read was Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan. This is another 5-star for the month. Acts of Desperation is about this girl who falls in love with this guy and they're just really not good for each other, and it kind of details the psychology of what was going on and how he was treating her poorly, but she kind of liked being treated poorly subconsciously. There are some abusive themes in it, so trigger warning for that. Sometimes love just is not reciprocated. That's something you have to figure out how to deal with. I believe that the ending was very satisfying. It didn't really like wrap it up in a bow. But yeah, 5 stars. I really want to read that book again. I wish I had a physical copy because I wanted to like highlight so many things in that book. The next book that I read was Upgrade by Blake Crouch. This was one of my book of the month books that I was so excited about that I literally started it the day that I got it in the mail. It is a science fiction thriller about basically genetic mutations. Kind of gave me like the Matrix vibes with how fast-paced and like weird it was. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I am hoping to read more Blake Crouch. I know Recursion got really good ratings, same with Dark Matter, so I think I'm gonna read those soon. We all know I love sci-fi. Last but not least, TikTok sensation Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. I said that very white. Tender is the Flesh was probably the grossest book I've ever read. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It was disgusting. It was icky. I don't like a lot of cannibalism trope books, but this one was really good. So I might actually change my mind about that horror trope. The whole time I was reading it, I was picturing like how they would make this into a movie. And I'm like, I don't think they could, because it was so graphic and so descriptive and so horrible. As a concept, it was just so interesting. I've never read anything like it. It made me want to consume more media like this because it was so fucked. It was so fucked up. If you like really gross books that make you think about things you don't want to think about, then I highly recommend it. I hate to end on that note. I hope y'all are having a lovely summer. If you have any suggestions on books that I should read, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear about it. Have you read any of these books that I read? I'd love to hear about that as well. As usual, like and subscribe. If you don't want to, that's fine, but I appreciate you. Have a great day.